Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trauma Recovery Coaching Summit, sponsored by the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaching. I'm Bobby Parrish, the Executive Director of the association.
And hi, I'm Sarah Parrish, the Deputy Director.
We're so glad you're here to listen to 5 days of interviews and discussions with our coaches. We have information about trauma, recovery from trauma, and trauma recovery coaching. We do want to give a trigger warning and let you know that some of the topics that we're talking about could be triggering. So please exercise your best self-care.
Thank you, Bobby. So today we have the absolute pleasure in welcoming Leslie Rochelle. And today Leslie is here to talk to us about Survivor to Thriver, Life After Spiritual Abuse. Hi, Leslie. How are you doing today?
Hi, Sarah. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Really well. Thank you so much. So, Leslie, can you just help our viewers and stuff like that? What is spiritual abuse?
Spiritual abuse is something that's very common in the U.S. UK and Spain are the three most common countries where we find this kind of abuse. And I actually have some references I'd like to read from the National Association for Christian Recovery.
Of course.
If I may. And this is a direct quote from their website. There is a sense in which all abuse can be spiritual abuse. For example, any form of child abuse can do damage to a child's emerging spirituality. The fact that the damage includes damage to the spiritual self is what makes it spiritual abuse, in addition to whatever other kind of abuse is going on. So I'd like to point out, typically spiritual abuse is one of many types of abuse going on in the child or adult's life. And then to go on further with more examples, some abuse is spiritual abuse because it takes place in a spiritual place or context. And this would apply to churches, synagogues. I'd also like to mention home churches can be a source of spiritual abuse as well. It's not necessarily a mega church or a cathedral. It could be even a family that has a few families come over and they share the same spiritual beliefs that could be abusive in nature. It also plays into sexual abuse. A lot of the sexual abuse that has gone on in churches that we've heard about in the news is also considered very paramount to spiritual abuse. And the two, sadly, really go hand in hand far too often. And a direct quote about that, spiritual abuse by a priest or pastor, for example, is clearly a form of spiritual abuse in addition to sexual abuse. The use of spiritual truths or biblical text to do harm is another form of spiritual abuse. Sometimes battered wives are told God wants them to be submissive to their husbands. Sometimes children who are being molested by their parents are told that God wants them to be obedient. Sometimes people quote, "Do not think of yourself more highly than you ought to." And that's also a way verbal abuse plays very close quarters with spiritual abuse as well. These are examples of abuse. Even if what is said is a quote from the Bible, even if submission and obedience are in a general sense virtues, it is the twisting of good things in order to harm that is so disturbing about this kind of abuse. And this is from the National Association for Christian Recovery, and that's a great resource. I really hope people check out because they have so many resources for people that have gone through spiritual abuse.
Wow. You know, I can't begin to tell you the large percentage of survivors who I work with who have some form of spiritual abuse in their background. It is so prevalent. What drew you to this work, Leslie?
Well, I grew up in a very fundamentalist home, and I was actually directly involved with a cult. So I grew up with spiritual abuse being how they controlled pretty much everyone. And that led to the verbal abuse, pretty much yoked with the spiritual abuse yoked to the sexual abuse yoked to the physical abuse. And it really made a circle of abuse that was a perpetuating cycle that just kept going around and around for many years. As I got into my adult years, really broke away from that and found ways to have spirituality that was healthy, that made me feel empowered, that helped other people feel empowered, that wasn't about controlling someone. It was about, well, what do I think about this? Not what I was told to think about it. And then over the years, I found Trauma Recovery University and really started working on healing through community, healing through reading books, healing through meditation. And that path has led me then to become a trauma recovery coach specializing in spiritual abuse, because I've experienced so much of it that I have a great toolbox to help others now. So that's the goal for me, help others find a way out of that cycle and find a way that they can have a spiritual life that's healthy and good for them and other people around them too.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is life like for you then, Leslie, now being like a trauma recovery coach?
To be perfectly honest, it's some of the most empowering work and some of the most triggering work.
Yes.
To help lift other people up. The way I describe it is when you're really in that somewhat mind-controlled state where you have all these abuse triggers, you know, you might be removed from the abuser for a few years, but they're still in your head, like it's still happening. It's kind of like being inside of a well that's just lined with mud and anything slippery and people trying to crawl out of it. Once you get to the top, you just want to reach down and pull everybody else out that's working towards getting out of that well of, in some ways, I would call it despair. So I feel like now it's my turn to be able to help people out of that and regain who they are and their spirituality and their mental health. And I feel very empowered by it. I feel very blessed to be able to do this work. But some days it's also very triggering too. So it also points to me what I also need to work on going forward personally as well as a coach.
That's a really good point, Leslie, that, you know, sometimes this work that we do can be triggering. So what do you do? How do you take care of yourself when you're triggered by some of the things that your clients share with you?
I have found for me keeping a journal where I write what was triggering about a session with a client, that after I'm done with a session, I'll go through what was triggering. What did I feel empowered by to help this person? How did I see them become empowered? And so it's kind of a two-way street of feeling somewhat triggered, but also regaining that empowerment that I have, passing the empowerment back to them and helping them find the trigger and find a way to deal with it so it's no longer a trigger in the future.
Yeah. I love that. I love that.
So in your practice, Leslie, when you're working with clients and things like that, you know, in what ways do you help your clients in like finding their true self and helping them recover?
I've really taken a lot of time with the initial intake, and we go through what was their spiritual trauma. If it was a group they belong to, I have homework for them to maybe Google the group, see if there's other people online that are posting, this happened to me, this is what I found, maybe research about the individuals that led the group. That in some cases, you might find court records, you might find a lot of legality issues against these people about abuse. So to empower themselves that they're not alone first is my first step. And then I help them really find how to feel their own intuition. And for some, I've worked with them through meditation. For some people that are more physical and like to maybe go out and be in nature more, to go out in nature and really feel the presence of nature and how they feel in that space. And once they start feeling how their intuition feels when it's true, a lot of the triggers start to really fall away. I've also found and put together a small toolbox where if you have a question about, you know, why did this happen to me? Why did God let this happen? To write a note about it, put it in the box. And it could be a God box, it could be a universe box, it could be an intention box, just something to get that out and put it in something that's categorized. Many of us that have had narcissistic abuse or spiritual abuse, our brains are very categorized from that type of abuse. So to have a way to heal where you're kind of taking those thoughts and intentions and putting it in something physical where you could see it. And I tell them too, if the question is too triggering, don't worry about going back to it till it feels right. You'll get that answer. The intuition's there. It's just remembering how true intuition feels before all the programming and abuse set in that told us, no, you don't think that, that's wrong, to get back to true self. So it does take a lot of time, but it's definitely possible. And there's so many tools out there. For people that are really big fans of music, I suggest finding music that helps them feel calm, that isn't triggering to their abuse. Sometimes it might be music that could be considered spiritual. It might be something completely different than what their spirituality looked like in the past. I also have clients too that are trying to heal from spiritual abuse, but they're not really interested in religion, but they want to be more spiritual. So we look at healthy ways of living their truth in that way.
Yes. I think that's interesting because I know I have found that many clients who come from spiritual abuse backgrounds, they still want to have a spiritual life, but they don't know how to do that because in the past, spirituality has been so wrapped up with their abuse. How do you help your clients develop a healthy sense of spirituality?
First thing I like to speak with them about is there isn't any hurry to find a new or different way to feel about spirituality. It might be in 5 years you find the right path. It might be tomorrow. But for right now, I always tell them to just really be mindful of their triggers. If there's people from previous churches and groups that are triggering to them, we have a conversation about low and no contact with abusers or triggering people. If they're really drawn to, say, I don't know, maybe Buddhism and they grew up in a situation where it was more Christianity based, I suggest going to the library, getting some books, just seeing what's out there. Because a lot of us that had spiritual abuse, we were never taught to see what was out in the world. It was, here you go, it's in a box, this is what's going in your brain, this is who you are. And it's like, I really invite people to study maybe the religions of the world, different forms of spirituality. And with the internet, there's so many free resources. YouTube's phenomenal for documentaries about different ways of living, thinking, being, spirituality. That what I mainly speak to people about is to not hurry, because that can also be a form of a trigger, because there was so much hurry typically with other forms of spiritual abuse, especially if it's really ingrained in them from childhood.
Yeah, for me, I got the word to be curious about, just to have that curiosity, what else is going on out there. Yeah.
And I think curiosity too is something that's definitely been stunted for people. So to kind of regain that inner child curiosity with spirituality will definitely start to heal that inner truth, heal that inner intuition. And for some, I've had a few clients too that over time they're just like, I don't think this is for me right now. And they take more of an agnostic or atheist approach, and that isn't any less spiritual or more spiritual than anything else. It just might be how they interact with themselves and the universe. So my whole goal is just getting back to that true self intuition point.
Yes. I think that's interesting because I know in my childhood I was very much taught, don't question what we tell you about religion. Don't question. That even asking questions was wrong. And so I would imagine helping them to, empowering them and letting them be able to question, and it's a healthy thing, is a first step, like you said, towards gathering more information. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what are your hopes for the future? What do you want to do? You have this amazing skill and well of experience.
Eventually, my hope is to go on and become an advanced trauma recovery coach and take that next step. I'm working on putting together a book. I'm not sure if it's going to be an anthology yet or just a personal kind of experience ebook where I put everything about the self-care, somewhat about my own background, some about my own experience, that if I can do it, you can do it, chapter in there. So that's something I just started. My goal is to be done with that by the end of 2020. Hopefully sooner, but I'm trying to set reasonable goals for myself. Another part of healing, reasonable goals.
Yes. I love it. Thank you so much, Leslie. This is amazing. If you have listeners out there who are going, I really want to get in touch with her, I think she could help me, where will they find you?
They can go to www.leslie, Leslie, Rochelle, ROCHELLE.com, and you can find me there. That's my coaching website. You can also book online as well. If you'd like to reach out through email, my email is leslierochelle.coaching@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook as Leslie Rochelle too. If you type that in, you should be able to find me pretty easily.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Bobby and Leslie. And I just want to thank you, all the viewers today, for coming along and watching Leslie's amazing interview. We hope that you're still all enjoying the summit, and we've got many videos for you to all watch. We hope to see you all again soon. But until then, take care, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.